of the Cuyahoga County Finance and Budgeting Committee meeting. The first non-committee of the whole council committee meeting by Zoom to order. And the clerk will please call the roll.
On the roll, Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Tuma,
Here.
Ms. Simon,
Here.
Mr. Gallagher,
Here.
Mr. Strawn,
Here.
Ms. Brown,
Here.
Ms. Baker. Here. We have a quorum. Also, let the record reflect that council members Brady, Jones, and Stevens are also in attendance.
Great. Thanks everybody for the attendance. And I would now like to ask whether anybody has signed in for public comment.
No, Mr. Chair, no one signed in. No one sent any emails.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is consideration of the minutes for the March 2nd, 2020 meeting of the Finance and Budgeting Committee.
Move to approve.
Second by Brown.
We have a motion from Councilman Strawn and a second from Councilwoman Brown to approve the minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the minutes for March 2nd, 2020 are approved as presented. The next item on the agenda is matters referred to the committee. We have resolution 2020-0094.
Resolution number 2020-0094, authorizing an agreement with the State of Ohio Office of the Auditor in the amount not to exceed $526,235 for an annual audit for calendar year 2019 for the period 1/1/2020 to December 31st, 2020.
Thanks very much. I would like to ask that anybody who is presenting today, please identify themselves by name and title at the beginning of their presentation. And it looks like Director Chambers is coming forward for this item.
Yes, good afternoon, and thanks for having us. This is the annual agreement for the state of Ohio to perform our comprehensive audit. I know the state auditor has, this cost is actually much lower than normal audits would be. There was a big discussion on the state auditor maintaining and keeping his fees very reasonable. He has done the audit, as far as I can recall, for the last quite a few years. And this is just part of the payment, the process, so that we can hire him and pay them for their services. So I'll do my best to answer any questions.
And Director, is it desirous to pass this on second reading suspension?
If we could do that, that would be great. I mean, it's an annual thing. It's with the state of Ohio. We would appreciate that if we can.
Okay, and I would ask if there's any questions by my colleagues. I'm hearing none, so I would ask if there is a motion to refer.
All right, Chairman, this is Chantel Brown. Is this the same? Is this the same rate? Is there increase, decrease, or is it the same?
I know it's a decreased rate overall. An outside firm would have been much higher. The state auditor has, broadcast in many occasions that they're doing everything they can to keep this down. They're actually kind of doing it at a loss, but in order to allow local governments to maintain them, that's what they have proposed. I believe it's slightly more than last year. I apologize, I can get you that exact number, but it's been consistent over the last few years.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chambers.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Any other questions? Do I have a motion to refer the resolution for a second reading suspension?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to refer resolution 2020-0094 to the full council with recommendation to leadership to place on the agenda for a second reading suspension. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it, and Resolution 2020-0094 is recommended to the full council. We now move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is matters for discussion, of which there are 2. And the first one is the review of the county's first quarter financial report.
Okay, I'm going to take control of the screen for 1 second here. We're working on one issue here. This chart.
Oh, bear with us here.
I think it ended with this. Yeah. From the beginning here. Okay, before we start with the presentation, I just wanted to share with you some additional information regarding some of our projections. As you know, we've been working very hard to find data. Data is obviously knowledge, and it helps us. I was able to find what you see here. It's a information basically on consumer spending. And as you can see, everything kind of dropped off there very sharply right there at the end of March. And can you, I'm having trouble seeing my own screen here. I apologize. Let me see here. Which one of that makes it?
It works for them, it works, I mean,
They can see it. Yeah, you can see it substantially below 20%. We're actually hovering around 30%. From the beginning of the year, you can see up here, it's right around, I can't read it, I apologize, my screen's a little bit low here. But this is some data representing the entire country. This next chart basically looks at the US compared to Ohio. Once again, you can see how Ohio dropped down. And, you know, through the end, we were at about 15% for the country versus the 20% for the state of Ohio. You can see some rates almost at 30%. And once again, this is, you know, spending for all. You can see the different categories here. And then if we look at Ohio versus Cuyahoga County, you know, at our peak, which I highlighted here, we were about 37.9% below. And that's once again, all consumer spending. So we finally found somewhere where we can start looking and tracking and finding information for what we've been able to see visually for quite some time. You saw some spikes here, but none of the spikes ever got within, you know, the 20% or close to it. We never got back to normal. And in fact, you can see at the beginning of the year, we were doing really well. We had projected originally around 5% growth. And obviously it was exceeding that. We were right on that number overall. But through the end, what represents up here in writing is, you know, we're still significantly over the 20% overall for Cuyahoga County, even though the state itself is a bit lower. So Cuyahoga County is experiencing much more of a decline than the rest of the state of Ohio. Now, this is a open website. You can see some counties within Ohio are actually seeing some positive growth, but it's an interactive. We can certainly, the next slide here I can go to is the unemployment claims. Clearly, right now it's up here about 1.2 million. This was as of the beginning of May. But it's important that once again, I found somewhere to help me, you know, with the numbers and help me take a look at what's going on. And this will give us some more information for us to make some better decisions in the future. It's updated every week. It's actually a little bit behind, so I'm kind of waiting for additional information. But overall, I think this slide here kind of tells what we were, you know, anticipating, and we'll wait to see whether it trends down further or it starts going up now that we're reopened. So I just wanted to start with this information, and we'll certainly keep updating this and keep watching this. And now we'll jump into the reason we're here. As you know, too, once again, the unemployment, all-time high, 3 million. And right now, I think we're at almost 36.5 million as of May 15th. So with that, we're going to jump over to Walter, give us an update on the first quarter. There we go. Down further, or it starts going up now that we're reopened. So I just wanted to start with this information, and we'll certainly keep updating this, and we'll keep watching this. And now we'll jump into the reason we're here. As you know, too, once again, the unemployment, all-time high, 3 million. And right now, I think we're at almost 36.5 million as of May 15th. So with that, we're going to jump over to Walter, give us an update on the first quarter. What is going on? I don't know. Were you guys able to hear all that? I apologize. It seems like there was a little bit of a difficulty.
Yes, we were able to hear.
Okay, somehow it started repeating. But I just wanted to share with you some information that I found. So now we're going to jump into the first quarter. So I just wanted to start with this information, and we'll certainly keep updating this, and we'll keep watching this. And now we'll jump into the reason here. As you know, someone needs to mute their computer or phone. So. Okay, I think that did it. All right.
Okay, good afternoon. Walter Parfialis, Office of Budget and Management, going over the 2020 quarterly financial report for the first quarter. I can just use the arrow key, right? Just a couple of quick highlights. In February, we went live with the new Infor Lawson system. We also received $95 million of additional opioid settlements. We declared executive order for mission critical purchases to respond to COVID-19. We received approximately $215 million in CARES Act funding. We're in the process of replacing the Metro Health line of credit. Hopefully we're going to save about $190 or $191 million annually for the next 3 years. We have funded our ERP for the completion of phase 1 through August 31st. We've replaced and increased the 3.9 mils HHS levy to 4.7 mils. That should add 35 million additional funding each year for the next 8 years. We successfully maintained our AA stable and AA2 bond ratings from S&P Global and Moody's Investor Services. And just now we're finishing up our refunding of our $28.1 million in taxable economic development revenue bonds and saving approximately $9.3 million over the next 10 years.
Director,
Yes.
for the record, the savings on the Metro Health is 190,000, not 190 million. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's $190,966 each year for the next 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Just want to quickly go over the assumptions that are in our 2020 projections.
And Director,
Yes.
Can you advance the screen so that that the people who are watching can see the slide that you're working from? We still just have the first page on our
Oh,
screen.
I'm sorry. Jonathan, what is going on here? Is it not shared?
It's shared, but we just have the first page.
Is it opened up more than once potentially, perhaps? How about now? Can you see the assumptions for 2020 projections?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Beautiful. I think we had the file opened up more than once. I apologize. Assumptions for these projections on the revenue side, 20% reduction in budgeted sales taxes. I'm sorry, was there a question? Anyone? Okay, 10% reduction to other budgeted general fund revenues. We have a 10% reduction to budgeted HHS levy revenue. And the expenditures include a 10-day furlough for county executive staff and a 10-day furlough for the county prosecutor's office staff. So starting right at the top, taking a look at general fund before any reserves on the balance, there's a column for the budget, a column for the estimate. The estimate, we start with the beginning cash balance of $139 million. We have revenue projected at $401 million and expenditures of $455 million for an ending cash balance projected at $85 million.
And
Same thing.
Director,
Yes.
why is the beginning cash balance in the 2020 estimate $2 million different than the beginning cash balance in 2020 budget?
There were some transfers that were done at the beginning of the year into the general fund. The casino tax fund was added, the auto title was added, coroner's lab was added, and the planning commission was added. So in essence, it moved cash balances into the 2020 actual cash balance.
Okay.
Well, you'll notice the revenue is going down by $73 million and expenditures are projected to be $26 million under budget. We'll go over those in the next two slides. General fund revenue is projected at $401.5 million, which is $73 million or 15% under the original budget. It's $48 million or 10.7% less than 2019. And down on the left-hand side, I've got a couple of bullet points that talk about every one of our revenue sources. You'll see sales taxes reduced by 20% in all cases and all the other revenues by 10%. But I do have some numbers that I would like to share. Just reporting revenue through March 31st for the first quarter. We were at 113 million or 23.8% of our budget. Obviously, first quarter, we should be around 25, so we're pretty close. Gross sales taxes through March were 72.6 million at 6% more than last year. Taxes now through April, because we do have April's number, we're at $93.3 million, or still 6.3 over last year. But just in the last couple of days, we did receive May's number, and now we're at $112.4 million, and our percentage year over year has dropped now to 4.5%, but we're still ahead. Property taxes were 13.2 million, 48.3% same time. I think that's, based on property tax collections twice a year, I think that's in good shape. License and permits through March is $14,400, about 20% of the budget. Fines and forfeitures, $966,000, 11.2% of the budget. Seems like we lost some ground there. These are basically costs and fees collected by the courts. Charges for services through March were only 9.8 million or 10.9% of the budget. These are all of our fees: auditor, treasurer, transfer, conveyance, recording, sheriff, jail, now auto title, lodging, board of elections, medical examiner. Intergovernmental was $12 million or 24% of budget. That one held pretty strong. Includes our local government fund and the state public defender. Both through March were just slightly under budget. And then the other revenue is 3.2 million or 11.4% of the budget. This variance primarily due to timing, I believe. It's the draw of the MTO money, the repayment of Cavalier's debt service, the cash transfer from Road and Bridge for renovations of the Harvard Garage, and $9 million in bed taxes.
So, Director,
Yes.
how much money did we get in the May payment for the sales tax? And how did that compare with the number that you put in for May in the month by month projection for the year that you provided us a couple weeks ago?
Councilman Miller, we received $9.2 million in May. I'll have to give you the number of what the projection was for May versus what it actually came in at. We just got that in the last day or so.
Is it for sales tax?
Sales
I know
tax,
that.
yeah. Oh, Mike has it. Just a minute.
We projected, Mike Chambers, and we projected 19 million and some change, and 17 million and change came in. If you recall,
No, 19 came.
yeah, 19 came in and we
Projected 17.
oh, I'm sorry, I'm talking about March. I apologize. You guys, I'm sorry, Councilman, when you're
this
talking
is
about February?
I'm talking about the
This is actually March.
the payment that just came in, which is the May payment, which covers the receipts in March.
Okay.
My question is,
My bad.
what did we receive and what did we project for that May payment?
Well, I know we collected 17, we had 19 million came in. I don't know what our budget was.
Councilman Miller, we'll have to get back to you on that. We don't have it readily available here with us.
Okay, thank you.
Glad to provide that. I'm going to advance the slide over to the general fund expenditures. General fund expenditures projected to total $392.6 million, which is 26 million or 6.3% under budget. The majority of the variance in the general fund departments is in personnel services due to vacancies and the 10-day furlough that's projected for the county executive and county prosecutor staff. Larger variances exist in the departments listed. There includes the sheriff's office, the Department of IT, juvenile court, board of elections, the fiscal office, and municipal courts. About those as well. Again, looking just through March, general fund expenditures through March were $78.1 million or 8.9% of the budget. Now, first quarter, we should be closer to 25%. So you can see that spending is lower than anticipated. Personnel costs through March, $61.3 million or 22.1% of the budget. So there's some variance there. We're seeing vacancies in the sheriff's department, IT, juvenile court, municipal court. And then our other expense categories through March, $16.8 million or 12.4% of the budget. We have issues, we have some areas that are under budget, like casino tax for the county housing program and the community development supplement grant program. These are expenditures that were not budgeted. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that they were under budget. They're actually unbudgeted expenditures that appear to be over. These items typically are not budgeted until they're approved by council. We have a second amendment to the Justice Center contract, which was not budgeted. We have space maintenance at the county headquarters for chargebacks that were not budgeted. But at the same time, we have surpluses. We have surpluses in IT technical and network contracts, juvenile court space maintenance charges. All the Board of Elections budget line items have surpluses. And then the fiscal office settlements budget is also has a surplus due to timing of disbursements, meaning we've got revenue in our budget now that will not be dispersed until next year. The next slide lists our general fund reserves on the balance that we know about. The Lumen project at $4 million, the demolition fund at $5.4 million, Sherwin-Williams incentive at $7 million, the Hilton Hotel for debt service and property taxes. Debt service 9, property taxes 3. The Huntington parking garage for lost revenue there at 1.5. Lost bed taxes that we're anticipating at $5 million and lost admission taxes at $3 million for a total of $37.9 million.
So on the director,
Yes.
on the on the bed taxes and the admissions taxes, are these monies that we were expected these taxes to provide that would then be used for debt service, and so then the general fund is going to have to backfill it? Is that basically what the problem is here?
That is exactly the problem.
And what's the deal on the Hilton Hotel?
The Hilton Hotel, the debt service payment is made by the Hilton's revenue that they bring in. The Hilton revenue is operating at about 10% right now. They're now not anticipating being able to make their first debt service payment of about $9 million. And also there is a property tax payment that's due of about $3 million, both paid out of their operating funds.
And have circumstances changed about the Lumen project, or is this the same as what it's been?
Oh, it's the same. I believe development paid this $4 million payment, and we're due to pay the development fund.
But the Lumen project, this is money we're expected to get back. This was not a forgivable loan. Is that correct?
I believe you're correct.
So, so that one is kind of a temporary item, but the rest of them are things where we expect that we're going to have to incur these expenditures.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Bond. Ms. Bond.
Would that not be true of the property taxes as well?
Well, the property taxes will come back to the county as property taxes, but we'll still incur the cost unless things improve. I mean, the Hilton Hotel is, my understanding from our group, is that the Hilton Hotel is the only hotel that's currently open downtown. All the others are closed at least until June 1st.
Hearing no further questions, Director, you may proceed.
Thank you. The next slide is a recalculation of our ending cash balance along with percentages. Same numbers that you saw before, all the way through unadjusted ending cash balance. $85 million with a $45 million variance from budget. We add in the $38 million of reserves. It brings us down to $47 million ending cash balance with a percentage of only 9.6%. Originally budgeted, I think you can see to the left, the balance to expenditures on an unadjusted cash balance, we were at 27%. And after reserves on balance that were originally budgeted, we would have been around 19.8%.
So, Director, even though we're not in compliance with our normal reserve balance requirements, I'm presuming you would agree that what we're undergoing now is exactly the kind of emergency for which reserves are intended to be used. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
But at the same time, Councilman, I believe we should take some necessary actions. If we know that our revenue is dropping, we should do our best to adjust our expenditures to try and offset the revenue loss.
I have absolutely no dispute of that. We should not try to burn all our reserves in a short time if we can avoid it.
Mr. Chairman, this is
Yes.
Cheryl Stevens.
Ms. Stevens.
Could I ask a question about how the revenues were calculated? 401 represents money from sales tax, money from real estate taxes, and what else?
I'll go right down the list. Okay, we start with sales tax. It includes a 20% reduction of sales tax, property tax, license and permits, fines, forfeitures, charges for services, intergovernmental money, or funds, I should say, other revenue, other taxes, and interest, all reduced by 10%. So in essence,
Did you provide us with a chart that shows what you're projecting, estimating is coming in?
Of course, I'll provide it right after this meeting. I'll email it to all of you.
And the reason I ask that is because Somehow I had in my mind that you were projecting sales revenue as around $12 million. And I saw the numbers from the state and it came in at 19, which is good news for us for the last month. But I'd like to see all of that good news rolled into the monthly actual budget so that we can compare what we are missing in income, because that's a significant increase over what you had projected, if my memory is correct, because I don't have the numbers in front of me.
When we projected last on May 15th, we did project a $76 million loss in the aggregate between sales taxes and all the property taxes and the others.
So hopefully all of them are dropping by comparable. We're receiving more money than we projected. It's not unusual to do worst case scenarios. I get that. I have done them myself. But when things begin to change, that indicates to me that we don't need to go as deep into either our reserves or into the pockets of our employees.
Councilwoman Stutes, I believe that we haven't seen the worst yet. That is our problem. I mean, the state came back and they thought that we would have a 10.7% reduction in sales taxes that we just received in May. It actually came in at 7.8% for us as a county. From last month to, I'm sorry, from April to May.
Okay.
But I think that June,
Well,
July, August, I think they're just going to get progressively worse.
However, again, I want to see more detail rather than numbers around it.
Understood. Completely.
So,
Chair, if I may ask a question?
Ms.
Baker.
Baker,
Thank you. Just to clear, are we still projecting the $76 million loss, and that this first quarter, which as you just said, is not going to be as impacted as we may see in the second, third quarter, even though we do have some companies opening up, still the loss of sales tax is going to be impacted. Where are you in this first quarter compared to the second, third, and if we can out to the fourth quarter? Do you still see us having a $76 million project loss and using the reserve fund at almost 100 million, I believe, is what you wanted to take from? Are we on that path?
Mike Chambers again, real quick. Once again, I'll refer back to the initial slides I shared with everybody. We are talking first quarter, and once again, those drops is information. As we get information, yes, we can start looking at it. Right now, though, I think what we're waiting for is what is the true impact of April. I mean, as you know, we started January, February, and even March, we were rocking. And then, as you saw in those slides I shared with you at the very beginning, everything just went down. We went way down, almost 40%. So I'm waiting for the actual information. There is a 2-month lag. We did get the most recent number for March. It is up, slightly, but once again, we need to get through April and May and see how this reopening opens, and then we can start amending that. That website that I shared with you at the beginning is a tool to help us, see what's going on, more so than waiting, 2 months for the state to actually, get us the details and the data. And once again, if they say the state's down 10%, as you saw from those charts I shared with you, that doesn't mean Cuyahoga County's down 10%. We're going to be down more, and that seems to be the trend that's been set. So once again, yes, as we get more information, we'll certainly revise and look at it. But right now, I don't think we've seen the worst yet, not even close.
So if I may ask, then you're still thinking that 76 million, that's your number, unless something changes for the better or for the worse, we're staying with that $76 million loss, and we're talking about taking at least or almost 100 million out of the reserve fund. I'm just asking, are you still there, or are you thinking that may change, given the first quarter and knowing what's ahead.
Just given, I would certainly be, I mean, when we came up with that number, that was once again a while back. And as information comes and gives us more information that we can revise these, we certainly will. Obviously, for the 19 million that came in most recently, I had kind of forecasted 17 million. Once again, that last bit of March, I still think that there's some carryover going on. So yes, that was slightly better than what I had projected. But once again, March was, basically 3/4 over. So we'll see what happens now when we get into April. April's going to be a big month, I think. But yes, we will revise going forward. There's no doubt about it. And what if it gets even worse? What if we relapse? It can go the other way. But that's where information means, we can make better decisions.
And those numbers that we're talking about, it's not, we are still talking about going into the reserves. It's not just the furloughs or the 15% budget reductions. We are talking in addition to that, going into the reserve fund. Is that right?
Yeah, if everything was normal, we still would have had to go into the reserve. I'm just saying, just with the hotel and some of these other things going on, we still would have had to go into reserves just for them alone. Obviously, we'll see the impact of April's sales tax and then May, and then slowly we'll see what the reopening brings us sometime in June and July. But I mean, we can all see the papers and everything. I mean, everyone's indicating come October, there's going to be mass layoffs from all the people that took the federal money. How do I project that? I mean, that's why we have to wait as information keeps coming in. 36.5 million people are not going to go back to work anytime soon.
Right.
And that's going to have an impact.
I'm just trying to get my arms around your earlier prediction of 76 million and how it impacts our reserve.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously as I'm gaining more information, certainly I can start doing a little bit better forecasting, but that was what we stuck with for the first quarter, which is what we're presenting right now. Certainly there's no drastic change where we're going to come out of this thing even, that's for sure. We definitely will have to dip into the reserves no matter what. And the tune would be 76 million. Will it be 50 million? That's the final number. We'll have to figure that out.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Council.
just to reinforce what we just heard from the podium, there is really nothing to indicate that there would be a good April or a good May for our tax revenue. We have not been having our restaurants open to pay taxes. None of our events are open to pay taxes. Our hotels are not open to be paying taxes. So nothing on that side of the aisle is going to result in any tax even coming in as a neutral position. The next round, the first round of PPP, is going to be expiring in most cases in the next 3 weeks. Nothing to indicate that the markets have improved significantly to the point where you are not going to see big layoffs that are going to come at the end of the first round of PPP 8-week period of time. Those are going to expire probably the first week in June 5th. So you're going to see a massive amount of unemployment that's going to take place more than likely also. So I'm just reinforcing the podium.
Thank you.
So-
Thank you.
So, Director, seeing the need to make reductions, I know that that the administration asked all of the departments to submit information as to what a 15% reduction would look like. And I'm wondering whether you received that information from all or most of the departments, and whether any of those 15% reductions include layoffs.
Councilman, once again, we're still working through getting the information. I'll be honest with you, there's a lot going on, and I understand that, and we're trying to make sure we get the correct information. I know we have some internal meetings set up now to start reviewing and calling some of the department heads in so we can go through the information and ask some questions and see what is truly, doable. And then obviously, I don't know for sure for everyone, but there may be some layoffs recommended. The goal, once again, as I said before, was until we get to possibly June and see the true impact of April and then maybe even into July, May, before some of those decisions are made. The only issue may come of this is if some of them don't agree to the furloughs, then that would change, my discussion or my answer to you right now.
So, Director, I would just like to state my opinion, which is that we have, besides all the economic uncertainty, we have a huge amount of uncertainty as to whether the federal government is either going to provide us additional assistance, or more important than that, whether they're going to provide us flexibility to use assistance to replace lost revenue. And I think that before we get some clarity on that, we just shouldn't be thinking about laying off any of our employees. Once you let them go, you usually can't get them back, and it creates a great deal of hardship for people, and it adds to the economic problems that we're all dealing with, So I just think we really need to hold off on the layoffs until we have a lot more information, and hopefully we can get through this without having to do layoffs. I'm wondering how you would respond to that.
As I said before, the original intent was to hold off until June, until we had better data. Unless, for example, some of them don't want to, some of the bargaining units will not participate with the furlough, then there's no other option. And that is up to the bargaining units to make that decision. Otherwise, I'll stick to what we said originally, is possibly, in June sometime with better information, we can have, make a better forecast, and we'll make a decision then. And I understand what you're saying.
Director, I would just point out that furloughs and layoffs are not the only two options. There's all kinds of different ways this should be handled, and so I don't think we can state from the outset that if they don't do layoffs, well, then the only option, if they don't do furloughs, then the only option is layoffs.
There is options, Councilman, and that's what we're trying to hopefully come to some positive resolution. So I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
Shall I
Chairman.
proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Tuma.
thank you. Just to the director, Mr. Chambers, if I'm just hitchhiking off of what the chairman was discussing, what's the status of, thank you. What's the status of your discussions with our lobbyists regarding the CARES Act?
I know our executive team's in constant contact with them. Obviously, everything we've talked about, but revenues and stuff like that is obviously high on the list. So, I mean, we're meeting daily. We're actually vetting ideas through them. If we can use the money for certain items, trying to get some answers. As you know, and it's available to everybody, some of the guidance is a little fuzzy. And if we use it and we're wrong, then we have to pay it back. So we're trying to make sure that we're making sound decisions. So.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'd like to bring to the director's attention that we received a public comment. It came from Will Tarter from the Center for Community Solutions, and what he was talking about is that how useful it is that in the past we've had 5-year projections on revenue and expenses, and Mr. Carter said in his public comment that we have not seen such projections since the second quarter of last year. So I would just like to make a request that when you do the second quarter report, that you include 5-year projections, and hopefully by that time we'll have a little better numbers that will we'll be able to do them with some degree of credibility.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
Gallagher.
yes, Councilman Gallagher.
Okay. For Mr. Chambers, has anyone in the administration looked at all the programming, what's necessary, what's been expanded in the past 2 years that could be moved back to where it originally was, instead of going directly to furloughs and / potential layoffs?
I think everything we've asked for is we're asking the departments to go through their budgets that they know and look at stuff that maybe is not mandated, to see what we can start identifying first. I mean, go ahead.
There's an awful lot of low-hanging fruit in this county, and you know that as well as I do. If you need any help with that, I could be more than helpful in identifying some of the fruit that needs to be trimmed to save paychecks for people that are our people. And we're talking about real people here with that are providing services to expand. And I've noticed we've always expanded these programs. If we have to go back on that to save jobs and still provide services, I think we should look at that. I'm a little concerned about the furlough requests to the sheriff's office, in particular the jail. Why would we consider furloughs in the jail at all, considering the CARES Act money could be directly and without question used in the jail?
I think we're, once again, we're looking across the board, and for everyone, and everyone keeps talking about the layoffs, and I view furloughs as, you know, a bit of a give back. But we're not looking to lay anybody off unless the bargaining units don't agree. And once again, a lot of those discussions I'm not aware because they're confidential. So I don't know those at this point in time.
Well, maybe I'm on an email chain I shouldn't be on, but it sounds to me as though, at least what I'm reading, I don't know how you go into the jail that, oh, by the way, we have yet to start paying the multiple millions to the victims of our county. So the last place that you cut
another 85
should be
million
safety.
or whatever the number was. Yeah.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
Chairman,
Yes,
I know that the topics of furlough and layoffs are never a comfortable topic, but as our percentage, we have two speakers at the podium, what percentage of our budget actually is represented by salary and benefits? It's not as though we have a product or anything else. The only way we deliver services is more than likely is through salary, through people. Fortunately, that's the bad news, that when revenue line is cut, there probably isn't a whole lot of options other than suggesting, like Mr. Gallagher did, that entire programs, but those are still, if you eliminate a brand new program that was put in place in the last year, 2 years, 3 years, those are still represented by people who are performing those things in those new areas, and you're going to cut back. So the likelihood is that 70%, 60 to 70% of all dollars going through the county are probably salary and benefits. And that's the only way, when you get to $73 million worth of shortfall, that you're probably unfortunately going to be stuck with having to make those cuts and those tough calls.
Duly noted.
seeing no further questions at this time, the director may proceed.
Okay, thank you. We're going to now switch over to the Health and Human Services Levy Fund. Basically the same format that we followed for the general fund. Simple cash chart, beginning cash balance, adding revenue, deducting expenditures with an ending cash balance. We started the year with about $3 million. We're going to collect $220 million in revenue after a 10% cut. Expenditures at $227 million, ending cash balance taking us to a negative $4 million or a negative 1.8%. Let me get into the revenues. Health and Human Services revenues projected a total $220 million, 24.4 million or 10% under budget. Most of the revenues, property taxes, 220.8 million, which is 22.3 million, again, 10% under budget. Other intergovernmentals projected a total 14.2, again, 10% under budget. And other revenue projected at 4.7 million, which is $500,000 or 10% under the budget. I mean, it's
So-
not, yeah, go ahead.
So, Director, how was the 10% reduction in estimated property tax value arrived at, particularly given that in the past the property tax collection rate has been something that's moved very, very slowly, even under very adverse conditions. We've had major recessions and had that gone down like 1 or 2%. I'm wondering what this is based on.
Councilman Miller, this was just a 10% of budgeted property taxes on the Health and Human Service revenue side. It was just a straight budgeted percentage calculation.
My question is, what is the basis for believing that we're going to see anywhere close to that large of a reduction in property tax revenue, given that in the past property tax collection rates don't change a whole lot, even when there's recessions?
Mike Chambers again. I would just point to, once again, the 36.5 million people without jobs. And I know, and as Councilman Schron indicated, there's a lot more coming. So the number may be 6% this year. It could be 18% next year. I'm exaggerating that a little bit, but it was to be a number we felt it was achievable in light of everything going on. Once again, that was made back in March when we were assuming the economy would shut down, and we knew the first half was already done. And then the second half was trying to anticipate what would the impact to everything going on with everyone shut down, nobody working. And I don't think anyone would have projected we'd be at 36.5 million, but I'm assuming we'll be at 40 million or more before too long. And that impacts Cuyahoga County as well. So that was the projection behind that. People will not be able to pay their property taxes or their mortgages. As you know, the mortgages, the credit cards, everybody's been given these forgivable time periods, student loans, but sooner or later they have to come and pay. So there's so much, as the information becomes more and more, I'm beginning to wonder if that 10% could be low again. But that was the projection. That was the basis for that.
So, Director, I have to start by acknowledging that we're in a time for which there's no valid comparison in the past, and so obviously anything is possible. But I have to say that I will be very surprised if we see reductions in property tax revenues anywhere close to this projection. My thinking is that most people's highest priority is going to be to put food on the table, and the second priority is going to be to pay the mortgage. So we'll see what happens.
Once again, too, Councilman, just to throw in there, I mean, the impact of what's going to happen next year is even more so when a lot of the federal aid and the unemployment and all that starts running out, unless it's going to continue. But that's the crisis. And then if we hit a true recession, I mean, once again, we just reap back and we're doing really well, as you well know. What's the impact of that in the next couple of years? I mean, these are all, you're right. We're in uncharted waters.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, this is Cheryl Stevens.
Yes, Ms. Stevens.
I have looked at refinancing for both single family and for large multifamily, and thirdly for commercial properties in the last 30 days. And each of the lenders, ranging from small banks to large national lenders, has been willing to add on to the end of the mortgage, especially for our commercial and mid-sized properties, so that people don't have to struggle within the next year even to repay. Now, while it may add to the balloon, what that does for us as the public sector is allow tax payments to come in through those mortgages on the smaller end, and individually it frees up cash flow for the larger properties where they pay their own real estate taxes to make those payments on a timely basis, unless they decide to divert their cash someplace else. But that gives me reason to believe that while we may see a blip, it will not be a huge blip in our collection of real estate taxes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, this is
Ms.
Nan
Baker.
Baker. Can I ask a question?
Ms. Baker.
Yes, Mr. Chambers, we had 2008, 2009, 10, 11 with the housing crisis, and people losing their homes, and banks going through lots of regulatory change. Is that a period of time that you can take a look at, and just comparing that time with housing values and how we were able to collect our taxes during a time when the housing crisis was going on? Is that a reasonable look back? I know there are other differences with this economy, but as far as the housing market goes and how people paid their property tax, or how houses were compromised, have you looked at that at all?
Not yet, and I'm just going to reiterate one more time, because it's easy now, or it's not easy, but as information becomes available, as these programs started coming out, as the banks and stuff allowed forgiveness, back in March when we started going through all this, that wasn't there. We were using our best educated, information we had, looking at the potential for unemployment. Now, obviously, taking into consideration some of these programs, I think we're just going to kick it down the road a little bit. And that's why I'm really fearful for next year. But yes, certainly look at anything in history. But I've talked to quite a few people, and we've never had 36.5 million in 8 weeks become unemployed. It's never happened. Back then, it was a different crisis, nonetheless a crisis. So we can certainly look at it. But everyone I've talked to, you've never had anything like this happen. So you can make comparisons, but you don't really have a good base. And once again, in March, I didn't have, nearly half the information I have now, but, a lot of it is coming true.
Yeah, if
Mr.
my memory serves, we were at unemployment, I believe, at 12%, 13%. In some areas, perhaps not in Cuyahoga County, we were up to 20% unemployment. Certainly it wasn't within a 2-week period or even a 30-day period, but it was a high unemployment similar to now. It was a compromise of housing and mortgages and banks, and a lot of those variables seem to be similar in those respects, different in others. But I guess I was just, perhaps you can just take a look at perhaps that slimmer of what we did back then and how we were impacted for our county revenue in receiving the taxes from our property tax base.
Certainly will.
Mr. Chairman, Councilman Brady.
Council President Brady.
Yes, it's been interesting discussion around these issues. I would just like to indicate that several council people have spoken about the fact that we really don't know where these property taxes are going to be. It seems unlikely. There's no precedent for them to be as low in terms of people who pay their property taxes as you assume. You could be right, but to talk about the 36 million people unemployed is a shocking thing we're all well aware of. But it's not a straight line to our property taxes, and it's just pure conjecture. And I think that this discussion is probably somewhere between some of us and some, there are people at different ends of the spectrum here, and there are a lot of things to consider. But we can't just accept your conjecture that because of the unemployment rate in the last 8 weeks, that it's going to affect property taxes, or that you can project that. You could have 6 different doomsday scenarios to go on here. And we're talking about these health and human service cuts. I think we're we're out of line in considering Health and Human Service cuts based on projections that we have no idea whether they're correct or not in terms of property tax.
To the council president, I don't disagree with what you're saying. Once again, property taxes, although very important, are a smaller source of our revenue. Our interest income, as you know, is, I think it's 16 million. Once again, a year ago, we were getting 2.5, now we're getting 0.7. Our fines and forfeitures, another source of income, is going down. People aren't issuing tickets. Another equally comparable revenue stream as well, which is down more. So when you take all of the non-sales tax items together, is which how we apply that 10% ratio, yeah, we might be off in some, but we're going to be underestimated in others. So I don't disagree with you, and I'm not trying to minimize what you're saying, but the property tax component is a smaller piece of the overall puzzle. The sales tax is our big ticket item.
All right. Well, I'll just say that this is a good hearing. The people of Cuyahoga County have spoken quite loudly about how their support for Health and Human Services in this county, and that the people who run this county should be aware of that and should hear that, since we put it on the ballot ourselves. And I believe that we can find a way through this without any serious cuts to Health and Human Services. And if we're going to do them, then we should be cooperating and working together on where those cuts are going to be, because we may have some disagreements over where they should be if they're needed.
So I would just like to add that that the property tax is a relatively small part of the picture when you're talking about the general fund. But when you're talking about the Health and Human Services, the property tax is the largest part of the picture.
I agree with you, sir. Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Simon.
thank you. So when I'm looking at the HHS picture here with property taxes, and we all acknowledge that this 10% is probably not accurate, it's overestimated. I would prefer to get an analysis with a more realistic view of what's happening, because this is misleading to some extent. Over compensating for what's, this 10% is probably not going to happen. So can we do a slide next time that actually reflects a realistic projection? And that I want to say that as well as the intergovernmental money. So we have a real idea about this. So this isn't, something we're just guessing at. And if we're going to guess, I'd prefer to be it along the lines of the mortgage crisis numbers than what we have here. That's all.
To the councilwoman, certainly information, once again, it makes better decisions, and we won't have the property tax, history until we figure out when it's done in late August, early September. To wait until that point in time to start making some adjustments, and I'm looking at the general fund again, obviously, and these are the factors that we're putting into some of the decisions we're making. As I indicated before, property taxes on the general fund side is a little bit lower, but I agree with you. There is no historical perspective unless we go back to the crisis. But once again, that's not an apple-to-apple comparison. So based on the information we have, this is the decision we made. And as I indicated, some of the other areas that we estimated 10% are coming in higher than that, but duly noted.
Mr. Chair, to the
Yes,
director.
Ms. Simon.
I just want to say, if this information is, I believe that this information is necessary to look at, but why do we have information that we all deem is not going to be realistic or accurate? And I understand we need figures and we need estimates and projections, but I think we all sit here and agree that this 10% on property taxes is not accurate. So why are we making decisions based on something on the high end at this time? I don't agree to, when we're looking at things, I want them to be closer to reality, and then we can make some real good decisions. I agree this is important to have numbers, but pulling them out of the sky at this high end is not helpful. It's not helpful to me as a council person, nor to the employees who are taking the hit for these escalated numbers. That's all.
Yeah, can I just
Okay,
add something? It's Walter, can I? Sorry. Oh, of course.
Excuse me, may I speak, Mr. Chairman?
yes, you may, Mr. Executive.
Thank you. You know, I'm not an economist, and I admit that freely. I rely on experts. I believe that Mr. Chambers and Mr. Perfiewicz are closer to being experts than certainly than I am. They projected the 10%. We've talked to others that have given us the 10% number. It is true that we haven't, that this is unprecedented. The fact is that people pay property tax. The owners of properties pay property tax. Right now, we have unprecedented numbers of people who are unemployed. I know that the Cleveland.com ran a story about this being unprecedented and looked back 20 years. And in the last 20 years, there hasn't been a 10% delinquency in property tax. There also hasn't been the numbers of unemployed in the last 20 years. The last time, as far as I understand it, that we had this number of people unemployed was the Great Depression. And the Wall Street Journal has reported that during the Great Depression, there was more than 25% of delinquency in property taxes. So nobody knows the numbers. And as I've said before, I think it would be a mistake to just sit and wait and let matters get worse potentially. We can always go back, but we can't go forward. So if we sit and the numbers turn out to be as bad or worse than what was projected, then we have a real problem. I understand the reluctance to lay people off. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to avoid that. But if our 76 million and projection for the HHS levy are underestimated because we sit and wait, we're just going to have to take more drastic action. We're trying to avoid that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
just in
Council
response to the county executive, having worked with him and they enjoyed that, this fact that he has for at least 3 or 4 times during his time as county executive predicted that the county was about to go through the floor. Now, even a broken clock is right twice a day, so maybe he is. But this isn't anything different than I've heard in a long time, and I don't think we can go back to 1930 and think we can make any kind of comparisons to today.
okay. Hearing no further questions, the
Mr. Chairman?
director, Mr. Executive.
If I might just respond, because that comment I think was incorrect. If Mr. Brady, if the council president is referring to the somewhere around $60 million, if I recall, when I first came in to office, that we had a hole in the budget, I believe that was borne out to be accurate. With the second budget, where I indicated I thought we had about I forget what the number was, about 60 million over the 2 years because of the elimination of the Medicare tax. That turned out to be accurate. So if I'm a broken clock, I was right, at least on those 2 times.
Okay, Director, let's proceed on the presentation.
Thank you. Health and Human Services levy fund expenditures totaling 227 million, which is 16 million or 6.5% under budget. Under budget in several line items, including personnel, contracts, other operating for most of the HHS departments. Again, this does include a 10-day furlough for county executive staff, and the larger variances exist in these 4 areas: child support, juvenile court, Division of Senior Adult Services, and the Department of Health and Human Services on the administrative side. Health and Human Services levy ending cash balance projected again to total negative 4.2 million or a negative 1.8% of expenditures. Included in these numbers is a $40.4 million subsidy for the Adamsport, $32.5 million subsidy for Metro Health, and then $154.5 million for the Health and Human Services divisions. But one thing I'd like to point out is the fact that in 2019, we ended public assistance with the fund balance of about 34 million, made up of public assistance funding of 24, children's services funding of 7, and child support funding of $6 million. This ending cash balance in these public assistance funds can be used to offset some of the 2020 subsidies and restore some compliance with Code Section 707.01.
So Director, why do we have public assistance separated from children's services and child support? I haven't seen PA funds presented this way in the past.
Councilman Miller, they've always been separated. They're required by the state to be in their own separate and distinct funds.
And Director, is all of that 34 million free and clear, or is some of it required to cover encumbrances of expenditures that haven't been made yet that we're obligated to?
Councilman Miller, the $34 million includes $14 million of encumbrances. So approximately $20 million is available balance.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Certainly. This is just a slide that shows those ending cash balances for the last several years. We go anywhere from $20 to $40 million. Just quickly, an all funds revenue chart and an all funds expenditure chart. Totaling 1.9 billion, which is 420 million more, 27% over what's in the budget. Funds contributing to this balance, this $420 million balance is, I'm sure everyone's aware, opioid mitigation funding came in at $117 million, which was not budgeted. CARES Act funding of $215 million, which was not funded. Which was not budgeted. And also there was a budget correction. Board of Developmental Disabilities revenue was under budgeted by $97 million. All fund expenditures totaled 1.6 billion, which is $52 million or 3.4 over the budget. The departments contributing to the decrease. Departments or funds, I should say. Opioid mitigation funds 19.1, just budgeted recently. The ERP was just budgeted at 7.8. We have debt service out there that's over and above what was budgeted, about $2 million. Various economic development projects, $7 million. Hospitalization or the self-insurance at $5 million. Lodging taxes at $6.4 million. And then the Justice Center consultant at about $1.6 million.
So, Director, at the top of the sheet, it says all funds expenditures total 1.6 billion, which is 52 million over budget. But then
I'm sorry, that's
in the lower item part, it says departments contributing to $52 million decrease. So are we under budget or over budget on the all funds expenditure?
We are under, that should read as an increase. I'm sorry.
Explain that again.
I'm sorry. These are, that should read as a $52 million increase because we increased the opioid mitigation.
I see. Okay. So departments contributing to $52 million increase.
Increase, correct. I'm sorry. I will correct that.
Thank you.
I sent over.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. That is the last slide.
And I believe this. So,
Mr. Chair.
do you have any further? Yes, I think we're open for general questions on any of what we've heard, Ms. Baker.
Thank you. The previous slide before this one, the revenue, if we can go back to that.
Yes.
Okay, the opiate mitigation funding and well, let's just take the opiate mitigation funding and also the HHS levy passage and the amount of people that perhaps we were going to hire in order to spend those dollars and take care of the additional services that were projected that we were going to try and do. Has that outlook changed at all? First of all, are we able to hire the people that we think we can hire and have
Oh,
any?
absolutely. No, it's been budgeted and several of the departments are moving forward in hiring the staff.
Okay, so when we talk about reducing staff or possibly reducing staff, furloughing, there's another area we are actually hiring our staff. And two of those areas are probably bid and the HHS. Yeah,
it was the
I'm just
HHS,
is it changed at all, or is that moving forward as planned?
No, it's moving forward as planned.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else on the first quarter review before we move on to the Harris project? Hearing none,
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. It's
you're
Sunny.
just in under the wire, Miss
Okay,
Simon.
just a thought as we move on to Harris. If we do end up getting compensated from the federal government in a more flexible way with regard to how we can spend the 215 or additional funds that are forthcoming, would we be able to reimburse or stop these furloughs? Because I know the furloughs are supposedly taking place over a 12-month till the end of the year. I'd like to see the employees, if they have done so, somehow can get reimbursed. I don't know if that's a possibility.
Yeah, we will look at that option. I think that's very much doable.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Cornell Jones, have the furloughs begun? I was under the impression they had not. Do we have a timeline for when they actually start if they have not already?
Yes, they actually started last pay period for the county executive staff and the prosecutor's office staff, and they will run all the way through the month of February.
Well, my feeling certainly is, and I'm echoing Councilman Mike Gallagher, we need to, instead of simply a 15% across the board, we certainly need to look at the county jail. That is certainly one area where we can certainly need to have some conversation, because that can't be an area where cuts are needed, and we have too much history to think that we should simply have a 15% cut in our county jail. So I would like to know when that timeline is scheduled for, and when those cuts are supposed to take place, if you know.
Councilman Jones, we are now in the process of scheduling meetings with all the departments, and the sheriff is one of the first that we'll be meeting with to discuss the budget reductions.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Councilman.
To Walter P., as far as the furloughs go, so the furloughs have already begun, but you're gonna discuss meetings about the cuts. I'm a little confused as to the order here. Shouldn't the meetings have occurred prior to the furloughs, or?
Well, there are two separate items. The furloughs have started for the county executive and prosecutor's office. What we'll be discussing are the cuts to the departments on top of the furloughs, in addition to the furloughs.
Okay, and then you indicated, I'm sorry, just a follow-up. You indicated that the furloughs are scheduled to run through February of next year?
Correct. They started, I believe, last pay period, and they are scheduled to go all the way through the end of February 2021.
Okay, and then I'm just echoing what Councilwoman Simon had indicated. In the event that we are able to use some of this money from the CARES Act, I would expect the same thing, that we would either end the furloughs or reimburse the individuals.
I agree. I believe we would.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Chairman Miller, Chantel Brown.
Oh,
here.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Brown.
Thank you so much. I was just curious if I heard you right. Did you say you were starting with the Sheriff's Department?
That's one of the departments. The Sheriff's Department has one of the largest budgets across the county, so we really want to start with the larger and work our way down.
So in a way, we're just looking at the bottom line versus the need of services.
Oh, no, we want to hear from every department director, the sheriff. We want to hear from everyone.
Okay,
We
so
don't want to presume anything.
Just for clarification, you indicated that the Sheriff Department was first, but as we know that our jails are is a very sensitive area, but your reasoning for starting with them is because their budget is one of the largest. I know Health and Human Services also carries a large budget as well. We certainly, I'm going to speak for myself, I certainly wouldn't want to see cuts in either of those departments, at least not on the forefront of things, because of the need of services that they provide are so great in the community. So can you give us an indication on how you're prioritizing the conversations, if you will, relative to the departments?
We're going to meet with the department heads. I believe the chief of staff will be included, myself, Mike Chambers. We're going to meet with all the departments. We'll be meeting with David Merriman as well for HHS. The size of the budget, while it's important, it's not a driving force.
Mr. Chairman, this is Cheryl Stevens.
Yeah, Ms. Stevens.
So whether council agrees to budget reductions or not, you've begun them across the board?
We have not begun budget reductions, but we have begun furloughs for the county executive and prosecutor staff.
I'm bargaining you.
And we don't know what the size really needs to be yet, because as you put it, we haven't gotten through the worst, but we also don't know that there's not a better scenario out there.
Mike Chambers.
But we've asked these folks to take pay. So you've already asked people to take pay cuts.
One of the reasons we did that is we wanted to make the impact to the employee as minimal as possible. That's one of the reasons why we went into next year a little bit, so that it would be, I think it's just under 4 hours or 3.5 hours per pay. So it was more manageable to them. Had we waited, it would have been much more unmanageable. And this was why we went ahead and moved forward with that, to minimize the impact to the employee.
Okay, with that, we're going to move on to the Harris Project.
Can I ask one final question, Mr. Chairman?
I would ask my colleagues' indulgence that this would be the final question, because I just don't want to keep us too far beyond our usual time. Vice President Jones.
Yes. Has the administration, have you come to any conclusion about how much the sheriff's department can be covered by the $215 million? In other words, obviously the COVID problem is a challenge there, and it falls within the guidelines. Has there been any discussion to this point about using those dollars in the county jail as opposed to 15% cuts and furloughs?
We're going to be looking at all those options when we sit down with the sheriff and have a conversation. And we're also, once again, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, finish.
I said, we're still reaching out with our lobbyists to get further details on some of those particular uses. But yes, we're certainly looking at that.
So you have not, at this point within the administration, before even going to negotiate, but you've not yet said, this is what the $215 million can cover already in the sheriff's department. I would think you could make those type of determinations even before you sit down with the department.
If I might respond, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, County Executive Budish.
So the question about whether the COVID money can be used to pay salaries of people in the jail or the sheriff's department is a good question. Initially, it was pretty clear to everybody, and by everybody, I'm talking about all the county leadership that I speak to regularly. It was pretty clear you could not use it for to replace any budgeted salary, sheriff or otherwise. Since that initial view, they came out with a guidance, they being the U.S. Treasury Department, which was a little bit unclear. And we certainly recognized the possibility that they could have opened the door potentially to use some of the COVID money to pay salaries of people in the jail and the sheriff's department. We talked to our lobbyists at length about it. They also were unclear, and it is risky to spend money, especially significant money, and then be determined to be incorrect. So I have drafted questions to the Treasury Department. I think about 5 or 6, Michelle, what's 6? And we've been going over those questions with our lobbyist, and the lobbyist has given us their comments, and that letter should go out today, as early as today. And one of those questions was exactly what you're posing, which is whether we can use funds from the COVID for people in the jail or the sheriff's department, even if it was budgeted salaries. Hopefully we'll get an answer.
Well, Mr. Executive, I don't see any risk in maintaining existing county jail staffing levels when we're still projecting. I don't see the risk at this point. When there's time to make a hard decision, we still have time. That's at least my estimation.
Well, as was mentioned earlier, and I want to clarify, even though our directors are meeting with the sheriff's department first, that doesn't mean the cuts are going to be first. They're meeting with everybody before any cuts are made to the budget. And as was discussed with council at the last meeting, there will not be an across-the-board cut. There will be strategic cuts made, and where those are going to be, I'm not going to predetermine. I'm listening to what you're all saying. I will note that we are still at about the highest point we've ever been in terms of corrections officers in the jail, with half the number in the jail that we had in the past. So whether cuts will be made there or not, I'm not at a position to know that yet. I will rely heavily on the sheriff's views on that, as well as the chief of staff and the financial people here. But no decisions have been made yet.
So
hopefully we'll get an answer from Treasury.
So, Mr. Executive, when you get a sense of what cuts you have in mind to implement, both in the jail and throughout the county system, are you going to share that with us at the council and discuss it with us before putting them into effect?
I would anticipate that we would advise the council members, as we do typically with a budget, where we meet and talk things over before we finally implement anything.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to the Harris project.
Give me 1 second, I'll pull it up. Unless you prefer a break, we can do it next time.
No, we're gonna move on. We got to do the ERP next time.
cannot make it bigger. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Just leave it like that. Okay, sorry, a little technical there. On the phone, I do have some of the team, Debbie Dapovich and Joanne Jackson. I got Lisa Rocco here in the audience as well. So once again, this is our update. A couple of quick things. There's two components of this contract that we have with Harris. We have the tax system, the real property tax system, which is, produces our tax bills. And then we have a second part, a component that was added at sometime in 2017, and it's the CAMA system, which is basically maintains the assessed value. So our assessed value for the county is approximately 30.5 billion, and the component of this CAMA system was going to help our appraisal department and our team with the assessed value. So there's a lot of reading there, and I will be happy to go through it, but in essence of time, I'll move forward unless there's questions. The summary of the contracts, okay, once again, you have a license agreement. You see the dollar amount, 2.2 million. You have support and maintenance, 2.7 million, and then the software implementation agreement is 5.76, and a total of 10,577,807. This is a current breakdown of everything that's been paid to date. You can see once again on that column here. Is everyone seeing good? Just want to make sure. Yeah.
Yes, we're seeing it.
Thank you. Right here, this $360,000 adjustment was made, and that was directly resulting from the communication we sent back in November requesting that the maintenance piece be taken out. I will point out under the CAMA system one, the maintenance is not paid until we're up and running. The contract was written under the tax component where there was a maintenance fee after the initial software was kind of installed, even though we weren't utilizing it. We had to pay. It was part of the contract terms, and it was paid. So of the maintenance component, right now there's a $546,000 balance, which I'm hoping that we could possibly save by the end of the project with foregoing the maintenance charges, which the Harris team has agreed to do so. Once again, total contract 10.7, total payments to date for both systems 5.9, leaving a balance of 4.4 million. And I even, you can see my notes down there, payment is based on deliverables. So unlike the ERP and delays and stuff like that, this is based on when they submit the system to us. So we can move forward and we accept it. So there is no risk at this time unless the county requests something different. This is the numbers, and as far as contracts, this is it. This is our balance due is 4.4 million. Once again, a quick history of the project. You can see it was kicked off in 2016. You can move forward with the use cases, the gap conversion, so on. But basically, it was in September 2019 when it was determined that they're going to have to reset the project. It was just not going where it needed. I came on board late October, and in November of 19, we sent out the letter basically memorializing everything that was said in September, that things weren't quite working to the way we wanted to. At this point in time, as you see, the project started in 16, and that was, 3 years later. We still didn't have a working function. So the letter that was sent to Harris back then basically had a bunch of asks that they would deliver by the end of March of 2020. We basically put them on notice that we weren't satisfied, we weren't happy with what was going on. There was a lot of changeover in their staff. The county did suffer some retirements, but there was a great deal of changeover on the Harris side. And a project that goes on 3-4 years now, it's to be expected, but it did have some impacts. So once again, based on that letter, here's where we came into the reset. as a result of the reset, all the testing, previous testing was discarded. So we basically restarted this project in November of 2019. Okay, Harris acknowledged themselves that there's problems. As you can see here, you can see the verbiage. But bottom line is all the prior work was discarded. Because the contract's payable on deliveries, you can see, you know, from that previous slide, we haven't paid anything. We actually paid per our agreement in September when we asked to waive the maintenance fee. We asked them that we would only, moving forward, we would not pay any more. So we did pay a small payment. I think it was like $150,000, and that was the end of it. But nothing else has been paid. The expectations of the letter we sent, as you can notice here, is, you know, we wanted to see significant progress on the data conversion. We wanted to see an overall improvement. We wanted to have a computation of an accurate tax bill, and we wanted to improve project communication. Those were all outlined in the letter that was sent on November 19th, indicating that they had until, once again, the end of the first quarter to, you know, make things right. Once again, in anticipation of all the testing that we have to do within the county, we have a software called TestRail, and it tracks. It's a software designed to track, you know, complex projects like this. And there's over 7,600 test use cases that this software we've identified to test. Now, as we start testing, we find out that the data and the tests are working. That number will be decreased. We may not have to test as much once we, you know, start, you know, receiving results that dictate us not to test everything. But for right now, this is what this software is set to do. And the slides to follow will start, you know, kind of outlining the presentation that we want to start moving forward with, so you guys can monitor, you know, exactly what's happening. Based on that TestRail software, we asked all of these items were to be delivered by 3/31, March 31st, the end of the first quarter. And as you can see, they made some very significant progress, and we have been pleased with the progress that they've made to date. You can see just on this first page alone, 102 test cases complete. I will note something very important right here. This user experience has been pretty much non-existent because we haven't had anything that's substantial, anything workable. And as indicated a little bit ago, there was a complete reset of everything we did prior to November of 2019 was basically thrown out. So Harris did commit, they did dedicate, they did assign a new project lead. They did reinforce their troops and started having them working with their developers side by side. Over the years, when I'm being told there was a communication gap between Harris's team members communicating to the developers. When I met with the vice president in December, they committed that they would have staff working side by side, and they have done that. And since then, as you can see, our user experience is actually very positive. You know, there's a few areas here that they need to work out still, but very positive overall. And as I move on to the next slide here, these are just the pie charts, which we'll be updating with you as we move through this thing. Right now, you see 17 passed, 16 blocked. Blocked means something happened where we couldn't move forward. Some failed. But these are all the metrics that software that we use to track all of the deliverables. And this is how we're going to determine that they're meeting their goals. Once again, the tax bill, you know, this was tax bill dependencies, which basically talks about your homestead exemption, your exemptions, your abatements, manufactured homes. This is just one component of the tax bill. And this is the deliverable. Once again, we move on to function areas, tax bill creation. You see this 6,002 potential test cases. This is where I referred to before as if we start running bills and we're finding that they're working well, we might decrease that number down a little bit. So far, the user experience, as you can see from the team, it's been good. Once again, very positive. Another, and this is just the pie chart version of that information. We'll move on to Treasury. You know, this is where the money is deposited. It's brought into our finance. Sure, sorry.
On the previous one,
Yeah,
no, the one with the pie chart.
sorry, sure.
Yes. Where the largest share is the 640 that says retest. Are those ones that basically haven't been done yet?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And
So-
remember, they have to retest everything.
Okay.
And just so you know, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, this report ready for review. And then this is reports unavailable. So just wanted to, it got cut off when we brought it into the PowerPoint. But the whole point of what I'm showing you now is to give you the framework of what's coming, in the future. So you'll be able to see over here, did we get it to our super user testing? Then did we get it end user training, and then overall status. So these columns on all the previous slides will start getting filled in, and you'll be able to see the data, and then you'll see the metric, the results here. How are we doing? And this is how we set this up, so you would have something to look at the progress, at each of our, coming meetings. Once again, this was the treasury component. Obviously, there's some issues with the escrow, but once, as far as the user experience, and these are things that obviously we're not going to accept until we get at least a good. One of the issues with eGovern, they missed the delivery date here. And that was more of, it's the online payment, and they committed to having that in the next couple of weeks, which is fine. Not to belabor, but as you see, none of these were delivered prior to, now. So overall, they did pretty well. So they have communicated with us.
So Director, on user experience.
Yeah.
Is good the highest rating, or is there another rating like excellent?
Joanne, if you're on, can you give me a hand on that one?
If we have that type of experience, then yes, we would rate it as excellent. It's one of our choices.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, this is Cheryl Stevens.
Ms. Stevens.
Can I ask a question here?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Chambers and staff, is this the same system that does appraisals of properties?
No, this is just, we're on the real property right now.
So, which system, I'm assuming these systems would have to link up.
I mean, that's a good point. One actually is for, and I'll have to defer to Joanne or Debbie on that one, how they're gonna link.
They're actually the same. It's the governed tax system as well as the governed CAMA system. They're just being implemented at different times. So we will complete the tax portion first, and then the CAMA will be added, but they're one in the same system, so it will be seamless, unlike what we have today, where we have an interface between our current CAMA system and the current tax system.
And that system has made lots of our constituents pretty unhappy.
Are you referring to the tax system, MVP, or the CAMA system?
MVP and the link between the two, because sometimes when there are adjustments through the Board of Revision
Yes.
or an administrative revision, that we get some complaints.
Exactly. And the Board of Revision will be a part of the govern system. The new system will be called govern. It will be for the tax and the CAMA, and include a module for the BOR. So we will have that link, unlike what we have today.
Okay, so our constituents will see improved customer service, hopefully?
That's what that's our goal, to improve customer service and improve the experience for the employees as well.
Okay. I read through this because this was the first time I'd seen this. let's see, we had testing and discrepancies where only 4% of the tested cases passed.
Okay.
Am I translating that correctly?
Are you on this slide here? I'm trying to.
Go ahead. Yeah. We've just begun testing again. As Mike said, this is a reset. What we've had through the month of April and the beginning of May is user acceptance training, where they went through every module that you see listed, owner occupied and so forth. So the analyst and some of the subject matter experts were trained on how to use the software. So we've just begun testing. As Mike said, you will see an increase in the testing that we're doing over the next few weeks when it's time to report again. So that's why that. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. And when do we think that we will have at least a decent cohort of your staff trained to use this correctly?
That is going to be later in the year. We need to get through the analysts doing the testing. They're doing the first pass, like the smoke testing, and then we're going to bring in the subject matter experts or the super users, and then the final end user training. So that will be later in the year. We're looking, working with Harris during the month of June and early July to work on testing the functionality and the data and any defects that are found, trying to get all of those bugs fixed before we bring in the end users.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, please continue.
Yeah, and keep in mind too that, you know, they did have a deliverable of March 31st, and obviously we have a lot of our team working from home as well. And, you know, we lost a little bit of time getting everybody set up. So as Joanne indicated, they're going to start moving forward. And as the next time we meet, you're going to see a lot more, you know, a lot more going on. But I just wanted you to get used to these categories, and then you'll have the information to compare. The next area, this post-collection budget settlement, I highlighted a couple items in yellow. This was missed on my first pass through with you when I sent the original PowerPoint last week. These actually were delivered on May 6th. So on your presentation, if you have the original one, some of these were blank. I just went ahead and just put them on so you knew. That's why they're highlighted in yellow. Once again, you know, some of these other areas, complete. And the other ones, the promise dates to be determined on some of these ones. We're going to work through them, and the team and Joanne and Debbie will coordinate that. Here's the results, same as the other slides. Just we broke down, just so you know, we broke down the project into big functional areas, and this is how the software that we set up, once again, enables us to track it. Parcel maintenance, yeah, looks overall very good. Delivered was promised 3/31. It came a little bit late, but some of that was on our end too, with, once again, with the COVID, trying to work from home, trying to get it all in there. So that was more, and the same thing with the vendor, but we were acceptable of that. Good. Once again, the pie chart. As we move on, the next area is the other, the interfaces. Once again, this date was left off on your original, the original one I left. That's why I highlighted it. And once again, the pie chart results. So what I would like to indicate and conclude with, since this is the last slide, is that even though we've seen some significant progress, we did have our law department send, you know, another communication to them, letting them know that we did see some positive feedback, but we also, you know, had some concerns. And, you know, once again, it's a formal way of putting them on notice, just so we can keep the communication open. And we felt the best way to do that would be to document it via another letter. And I'm waiting on their response. Basically, we saw a lot of goods, a lot of, fair, acceptables, complete, but we want to just keep the pressure on to kind of keep the project moving forward. And right now, the team has plenty to do to keep testing everything, and so does Harris. So overall, I'm very cautiously optimistic that we're moving in the right direction.
So Director, am I right that July of 2021 is now the go live date? Or January rather of 2021?
Right now, we're going to go through everything we can, and if there's other information, there's a lot that still has to happen for that to make that. I'm not saying that's not achievable, but there's a tremendous, as you saw, 7,600 tests. We have to get end user training, and this is something that I indicated in the very beginning: $30.5 billion. That this system is. Or this is our real property system. This is what does our tax bill. It sends out those bills. We want to make sure it's right. And if it's ready, we certainly will move forward. If not, as the contract's base, we don't pay until we receive. So we'll make sure that we monitor that, and our next report will be a little better positioned to see how the use and test cases are going and how they're completing the other tasks.
So what things would have to happen between now and the end of the second quarter ending next month for us to remain on track for a go live early in 2021?
Well, some of the things that we've identified was like data conversion is still incomplete. Some of the fields aren't mapped, and that's what the analysts are going through with all those test cases. Some of the prior year charges and penalty interest is not reliable. Well, there's a lot of data analyzing that we have to go through and make sure. And that just takes time with the team to go through all that. The tax bill is still not accurate. So obviously we cannot send out a tax bill that's not accurate. And then just, overall communication has been improving very well. And we're trying to make sure that the dates that we say, if we can't achieve January, we certainly will. But we want to make sure that we can do it properly.
So, Director, am I correct that if we're not able to implement early next year and it gets further delayed, that even though we would not have to pay more money in system implementation costs, we would lose money in the sense that we would continue to have to run legacy systems until it's done?
No matter what, when these projects are up and running, there will be maintenance on them regardless, but certainly we're going to run the legacy system. It is old, which is obviously the reason we're going through it. It obviously is still working, but there's a lot of improvements that can be made and reduce a lot of the manipulation of data that goes into this thing, and that's why we want to make sure we get this new system done right. You also have to understand too, there's a very finite number, I believe it's less than 4, maybe 5 companies that do this. And while this project obviously didn't come out to a very good start, based on everything I've shown you right now, we're very optimistic that the company wants to finish this, and we're going to have a good system. And certainly we're not going to pay anything further until we do accept it.
So, Director, I didn't hear a clear answer. Do we incur additional expenses if we're not able to start on time because of the continuing legacy costs, or is it more of a wash where the cost of running the new system on maintenance kind of balances off the cost of maintaining the old system?
Bottom line is we got to pay the maintenance on whether we have this system up and running or the old system. The old system we still need, and we're still going to continue paying. It's going to be an operational cost with the new system, no matter what, going forward too. So to say yes, it's an added cost, you would still have a maintenance number built in. Once we get out of this project, you're going to have an annual maintenance figure either way. But this is more on, it's kind of like the famous question this morning. You still need maintenance.
So, Director, when we get the new system up and running and we have it running for a little while, are we then going to be able to shut down the prior system, or are we going to have to continue to maintain that on an ongoing basis?
Joanne, I'll defer to you on that one as far as the transfer of the information. That's part of the conversion that we want to make sure it's correct. So once that conversion, and Joanne,
Right.
help me if I'm
And-
wrong, that's your history. Once that's done, we should be good.
Yes, once we go live, we truly go live, then we shut off the legacy system.
Okay.
So this is
And
Debbie
are there
Gasser.
other questions by my colleagues?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Gallagher. Mr. Chambers, when was this supposed to be implemented? What was the go date?
I'm shooting from memory. I think it's 2 years after, Joanne, do you recall, was it 2 years after?
Yes, that was the original. We should have went live with 2017 tax year.
So the answer to the chairman's question is, or at least I think the real question the chairman may have had was, what is the cost to us from 2017 to when you project this to go live? Because those are costs that would not have been incurred if not and but for the delay.
I think the true cost, and I hear what you're saying, and maybe I'm not communicating it properly, but I do, no matter what, you're going to have a maintenance on a system. So
I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
What was our cost due to the 3-year delay? You have a legacy system that would have been done with in 2017. So we're paying something from 2017 on the legacy system to the go live date. There's got to be a number attached to that.
I can look into that too, but I know the team that we have designed for this is going to be the team that maintains it going forward. We've lost a few members that used to take care of the legacy system. But other than that, I don't believe we've added any staff or not.
I'm not asking that.
I'm trying to get to your question though.
Okay, well, maybe we can have further discussions on this. This is hauntingly familiar to another wonderkind of electronic goodness that is costing our taxpayers many dollars. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could follow up on Mr. Gallagher's point of view.
Yes, Councilman Schwan.
Yeah, I think it's you're doing a lot of discussing about obligations to pay maintenance, and no one will disagree with that. What we wouldn't have had to pay was dual software. We wouldn't have had to pay for all the time and energy to do both the maintenance and service of the old product and the installation of the new product if they would have delivered to us 2 years ago. It just seems to me, if we are truly their guinea pig, we are being treated like the fatted calf, not the guinea pig that should have gotten a benefit from helping them to get a brand new product launched. And this will be their flagship product going forward. I have every hope in the world that this is going to be a great product and is going to provide benefit to the other 87 counties in the state of Ohio. But we are not getting anything for being the guinea pig and being paid dual obligations throughout this 2-year period of time. You cannot tell me, just like Mr. Gallagher, neither one of us can understand why you aren't recognizing that these two obligations of payment, coupled with the fact that you probably have additional labor to support the two obligations, are costs out of our pocket these last 2 years, of which we're getting nothing for.
Yeah, I will stand correct. And I'm looking at the maintenance, you hit it, you're right. We shouldn't have been paying the maintenance on the Harris. Right now we pay 1.5 million.
Right, and we've been talking about that right along. If you go back and look at the Cleveland.com article that occurred last time when we talked about this, it was pretty clear that these are millions of dollars that we would not have paid, the taxpayers wouldn't have paid, and we've gotten so far nothing. I mean, they should be falling all over their sword to give us, they should be giving us a maintenance gaps when we go live with this. We should not be picking up maintenance for a couple of years just to offset this. And whether we need to get it all up front or they defer it over a 3 or 4 year period of time, it's fine, because we're going to be with the product for a long time. We don't need to collect it all, but we sure as heck ought to be getting recognized for what we did and the fact that they're probably going to hold us out as their poster child as they try to go forward. And that ought to be worth something also.
Mr. Chairman, follow up from Mr. Chambers.
Yes, please proceed.
Mr. Chambers, have we paid any money in maintenance on the system that is not up and running?
Yeah, as I indicated on the previous slide, paid to date, if you go back a few slides there, you'll see that we paid total 1.5 million, and it was identified once again in the contract. In November, we sent a letter asking for that to stop, and they obliged. Once again, I didn't say we were done negotiating, and that I'm not going to do that in a public forum. But you know, that's the answer to your question. We have paid 1.5 million, and you know, there's a long way to go yet.
Do you have an anticipation cost of the overruns when it is up and running? If that date were real?
If once again, you're looking at the indirects, but as far as payments to Harris, the commitment was 10.7. It's unlike the ERP, they have to deliver. So right now you see what's there. There's no change orders on the horizon for this thing, unless we ask for something, which I can't see that happening. It's not like if we're late or they didn't train. I mean, they have to deliver. These are based on deliverables.
Okay.
It's a different style of a contract.
All right. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, on that same thing, can I follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you may follow up.
You raised that same response last time, Mr. Chambers. You said the contract obligated us to pay the maintenance. But read, please, the entire contract that said they were also supposed to deliver a product to us 2 years ago. You can't read just one half of the obligation and say we had an obligation to pay maintenance, and we did, without reading the other half of it that said they were supposed to deliver us a product, which should have stopped the ongoing costs to the other side, to the other product that we had to maintain, and that we had to pay service and maintenance costs of our individuals to maintain that second product. So please don't just read half the contract that says we are obligated to pay maintenance and not understand they were responsible to deliver a product to us.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just giving you the information from the date I came on board at the end of October and the steps we're trying to make forward. I didn't say this was over. I'm just maybe giving an explanation of why it was done previously. I'm not giving a comment either way on what I think of that, but I'm going to move forward the best we can and make sure the county gets the best deal.
So, Director, I certainly am in agreement with what my colleagues have said about continuing negotiations as to what we owe and what we don't owe. But I also want to say that for me, the most important thing is to get it delivered in early January of 21, because the county has a lot on its plate. We always do, and even more so with COVID-19. And the more we have things dragging out like this on and on, it just prevents us from dealing with all the other things that we have to deal with. And I see it as very important that we develop a strict time schedule of what's going to happen and when it's going to happen and who has to do what to make it happen, and that we monitor it on a daily and weekly basis and make sure that it happens so that we get it delivered in January of 21 and we're on our way.
Councilman, I do agree with you, and that's why, once again, these test results and this slide I have here, as long as we don't see fails and we see past, that's going to dictate it. Absolutely.
Are there other questions by my colleagues? Okay, well, we appreciate the presentation, and I would just remind everybody that when we had the first presentation, it was like we had sent a letter to Harris, and we weren't totally sure if we were going to be able to go forward with this project at all, and thought that we might have to quit the whole thing and start over with somebody else. And the director is telling us we don't have to do that. It's back on track enough that we feel we can get it done with the existing vendors. So that's progress, and I'm happy about that. But I do want to see more progress both on the negotiations and on getting us on a clear timetable for an early 2021 implementation. If there is nothing else, then thank you very much. That'll conclude our discussion of the Harris project. We'll have a follow-up in a couple months and continue to track where we're at. And in terms of miscellaneous business, I would just tell everybody that the next meeting of the Finance and Budgeting Committee will be at our regularly scheduled time 2 weeks from today on Monday, June the 1st at 1 o'clock. And at that time, we're going to do something that we haven't done before, which is that we're going to hear an update from the administration on the ERP project, and also a response and further discussion from our consultant, Zig Berzins, combined into a single session on the same day. So we're gonna instead of having the Monday and the Thursday, we're gonna try to do that all in one session 2 weeks from today. Is there any other miscellaneous business?
Well, because sales tax is driven by attitude and performance and expectation on a positive note, the stock market is almost going to hit 1,000 points today. So that's an attitudinal aspect that maybe things are starting to perk up and we won't have to go quite into the panic mode on sales, on our sales and revenue.
From your lips to God's ear.
I hope so.
There being no further business before this committee, we stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody, for your attendance.
Chairman.
Thanks. Have a good day.